Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of TRCOA's Behind the Groove. If you're here live, please introduce yourself and ask questions in the chat as we go along. This episode is sponsored by Stinson Recording Studios. Also, if you find this content useful, please like this video, and if you are new, please subscribe to our channel. We make new content every week. Today we are proud to have Ben Kliever. He's going to show you the best ways to mix drums. Ben is the owner of Nebula 88 Studios and one of TRCOA's beginning recording techniques instructors. Without further ado, Ben Kliever.
Hey everyone, welcome back to TRCOA's Behind the Groove seminar. I am Ben Kliever and I will be leading another lesson tonight. Tonight we're going to be talking about drum mixing, so that's what we're going to go into, EQ compression, kind of how I would handle doing live drums that I've tracked. Welcome Erol, glad to see you in here. So we're going to be talking about, going through this whole process. I have drums from a session here. They're completely, I've taken everything off. They're completely raw at this point, so this is how they were tracked. And I haven't done any processing yet, so we'll go ahead and dive in so we can get through kind of what's going on here and just take a look before we go in. So we'll just take a listen just to what the drums are sounding like from tracking start, and then we'll dive in and start hitting all everything that we're going over tonight. So here's just a little listen to of what's going on with the drums. Here it is in a little bit of context with just something going on around it. So that's just kind of in the context of the song of what's going to be going on. We're going to kind of handle the drums on their own and just go through how we're going to be processing that. So just kind of listen what the kick and snare and so if we go through and we look at what tracks we have on here, I have kick in and kick out that I tracked. So I have a kick drum that is inside the head of the kick drum. So it's going to have more bleed in there from other stuff. Then we have our kick out. I just want y'all to hear what these different ones sound like, which is almost just sub low end going on. Then we got our snare top, which is our body, like the thicker part. Then we have the snare bottom, which is the brighter, thinner part. Then we have our hi-hats on the side. Then we'll come back to the ride and the toms where we find a section where those are in. Then we have our overheads, which is an overview of our entire kit. Then we have some rooms here. Which we can notice are a little more on the bright side, since that is a room. Like whenever it's farther away, you're going to hear that more than like where the overheads sound a little more like direct mics. So we're getting all that kind of high-end information right there. So those are the mics we have going on, and that we have going on in this drum kit. Another thing I want to notice here, just so you can see, this is something that I've listened to that I felt like usually there's something with kick and snares where, especially if you're doing any kind of heavier hitting stuff, you're more likely to add in a sample to one of those two. I'm actually really happy with the way the snare sounds between these two, so I didn't really feel I needed to add another thing in there. But on the kick, I just felt like I didn't have enough attack, so I just happened to bring in a sample with that, and we'll take a listen to that. I have all these bussed into a kicks bus here, so if I need to do any processing overall to the kicks, or any automation, or want to add, I'm likely going to add some compression on here just to glue all my different tracks together. But here's the kicks where they sit. And here it is with my trigger added in. So it's just adding a lot more point and a lot more attack and click, which is the one thing I felt like I was missing from this kick. So that is the first thing I'm adding through, and have those patched into kicks, which is then going all the way to my main drums overall bus that they're all going to go into. I have snare top, snare bottom, which are going into my snare bus here for same reasoning that I can process them both together after I've done the individual processing. Toms, I'm going to go ahead and add a tom bus here. Let's see, I do have a tom bus here, so actually I've already made, so I'm gonna open that up and I'm gonna add these to this because I want to process that in case there is something additional that I wanna add. So if we wanna make both these toms there, we can click both these, hold Shift Option, and then click on the drums here, and then I can go to my bus, and I should have toms as an option on here, and there they are. And now these two are routed to toms. Now my hi-hat and my ride, let me see, I just need to see where they do some ride in this song. I believe they hit it somewhere in, maybe in one of these verses, maybe not, let's see. I think it's in the chorus. So there's a little ride hitting right there, just so y'all can hear the ride. So it's in the second half of the chorus is where I got some ride in here, so that's where we'll dive into that. Hey there, Michaela, welcome to. So, all right, so now that we've taken a look at what we have here, I have all these, I have my overheads. Now, I leave my cymbals where they are because I just have them going into the drums like normal over here. So I'm not going to add anything additional to those, to add any additional routing, because we're going to leave those how they are. Overheads are bussed into an overheads group, which I'm going to do I'm going to do some group processing on these because I want to treat them the same, and I'm going to do some of that on the bus. Same thing with the rooms over here. I have the rooms going to a room bus here, then it's all bussed into my drums here. So this is just a way to control individual sections of your drum kit. So let's go ahead and let's dive in, and we're going to go ahead, and now that we've taken a look at what's going on with our everything on our mix here, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to add some stuff in here. So first thing I'm going to do to all these tracks is I'm going to go ahead and throw some tape on them so that we get a little bit of that, like a little more analog feel on there. So I'm just going to hold Shift Option on all these and go down to my Slate Digital and open my virtual tape machine, and this should put it on all these tracks. There we go. Now it's all just coming out in the default, so I'm going to turn these off in the drums here, just so I can bypass them. Let me see. Yeah, let me do a little modification on this right quick on my group so I can control it how I want. Remember, we can always go make our group do whatever we want. So I want to go into attributes. I'm going to do the same thing where the levels are, actually I'm going to leave the levels where they are. And I'm basically just going to have this turn on solos and bypass. Same thing with the sends, just so they're not doing the controls, but here this way, the second I turn one off on here, it's going to turn it all off when I have the group on, so I don't have to go click a bunch of times. Okay, so we're going to start with our kick in here, so we're going to go ahead and just get going with that, and let's go ahead and start doing some dialing in on these. So you can hear how this is already adding some grit, and let me go to the verse so we can go back to that, because that's probably the hardest part we're hitting right there. Cool, so we've got that going on with our kicks in here. Same thing, I'm gonna dial in the other one over here as well. So now that I got these going, I'm going to kind of do that with everything in the drums. So I'm just going through right now and just turning this up a little bit on each one where it's giving us a little bit more. I'll have to go to a tom section for those to dial those in. Then we'll So getting this all in there, so I got a little warmth. It's gonna also make all my low end feel a little bit thicker too. So I just wanted to get that dialed and set in, and I have all these on my tracks now so we can just hear the difference between BTM on and off. So everything gets a little bit fatter, gets a little bit thicker, gets a little bit warmer. So the first thing we've done here is we've already just thickened everything up and made them all hit a little bit harder by just running it through some virtual tape. Now I'm going to go ahead and add in, I'm just going to open the virtual mix rack across these. Actually, let me make sure. I think the VMR, I want to make sure that it's, before I do that, that it's actually completely blank here, which it is. Perfect. So that's what I wanted to make sure that that was the default, because that's how I have it set at home. But sometimes the Slate Digital default is to have one of their chains show up the whole time, which opens a bunch of stuff that I don't want to start with at the beginning. So I can build it how I want to. So now I got a blank VMR on all these. So great. Let's go in, and first thing I'm going to do is, now that I've added my tape, same thing that I always like to, make this more analog by throwing in some more. Now I'm going to go to the VCC channel here, and we're just going to listen right quick to this kick and decide which one I want to use. Cool. I'm going to use the API because I like how it is, how it's sitting. So I'm just going to copy that across the board on here on these. So we just have APIs go ahead and set across the board, and then I can from there dial them in as I get to these as I go across the mix. And definitely, as I'm doing this, please ask questions, please comment, please say something while you're watching this. So if there's something that you're not understanding or want me to go more into, just reach out and about that. So I'm just pushing that just a little bit to where I'm getting that. We're going to listen to our kicks here for a moment. And that's already hitting pretty hard on that kick out already on this, so I don't even really have to move this knob because it's pushing it already. So let's just take a listen to what's happening with our kicks with this processing. So that's where we started before we did any of the tape and our console emulation, which adds a lot of thickness, a lot of presence, and pushes it more out front. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to really dive in, and we're going to really start getting in. I'm just going to do some mixing on this, and then I'll kind of talk about what I'm doing as I go through it. So now that I've put these kind of across, before I just dive in and start going into the kick is the main thing, I'm going to start with the overhead so we can get a good feel for the overview of the whole kit. And I'm actually going to do this processing on one thing here. So I'm going to change my plan right quick on this, put the virtual mix rack here. I'm going to do the same thing on the rooms because I want to process these exactly the same because we're basically treating these as a group as a left-right, which if you feel comfortable with that, you could absolutely track overheads or rooms on a stereo track instead of left-right. If that's what you so decide, so that way you're just processing them on one stereo track instead of busing them. But if you do, then you can easily bus, just like if you want them on individual tracks, just like this, you can easily bus them into that and just process them together on the bus. So Let's start with these overheads and start getting this this really dialed in. So I'm going to do the same thing, pull my VCC out just like I would on my normal channel, like if I was doing a just adding some thickness and warmth to that. So next thing I want to do after I have this dialed in is now I'm going to bring in, you can always decide which way you want to do this. We're going to go ahead and we're going to bring in compressor first, and then we're going to bring in some EQ. And I'm going to use the 401s. If you remember our lesson on compressors when we talked back, like 401 is really, really good on transient material such as vocals and drums. So this, you're going to see this on majority of as the compressor for majority of the selections I'm doing, but I'm going to use some other compressors as well on some different elements, and we'll see those as I go through. So I'm going to start with 2-to-1 here on this and start dialing this in where I compress these a little more so we can get a little more punch out of them. So I'm having that hit, now what I'm doing is I'm really controlling my transients more. Now these two overheads left and right are more stuck with each other. I mean, you can kind of see it looks like I already have these compressed going in there a little bit because they're pretty smooth, but this is just putting them together even a little bit more. And I have a pretty slow attack. We could even open this attack up slower if we want to listen to that. We just hear the faster we get, the more it clamps down on it, and it makes it feel a little further away and not as much transient material going on there. Cool, and that's where I'm gonna stick, is I'm gonna go on the slowest there where it's slow and open and we're getting all those transients through, but I'm still catching it and controlling it a little bit more there. So now I'm gonna add some EQ onto, I meant to grab the CS EQ. This one is very transparent, so I'm gonna use this on overheads. Another one that's, you can use SSLs across the board if you wanted to, the FGS. It is great on anything, so feel free to do that. I'm just going to use a few different things so y'all can see some different EQs that are going through across here. I'm going to use a few different ones. So but again, this is very transparent, and it's really just going to accentuate or push the frequency ranges that I'm going for here. So overheads, like we said, are an overview of the kit. So I'm going to push a little bit of low and a little bit of high and a little bit of the attack areas. So we can get a little bit of that. The mud area in overheads, which I usually do a cutting of this too whenever I'm tracking at the same time, is between that 300 and 600 range where it can get really boxy and really kind of woofy in there. So that's another area I'm going to look at. So we're going to look at some lows, we're going to look at some of our present areas, then we're going to look at some highs, and then we're going to cut a little bit of the boxiness. So I'm just going to do a little of that EQ right here. Just a little filter down here at 35 to control. You can hear how much that's adding. I think that's a little more than I want to add there, but we can see how it's adding beef to our kick and a little bit to the snare as well. Let's take a listen here between So 400 is where I'm really hearing this kind of sound. Like I'll show it where it's just it by itself so y'all can hear what I'm hearing here. So I'm listening between 400 and 600, but like when I crank this area up a little bit, you're gonna hear the noise that that kind of whoo, whoo, whoo kind of sound that's going on there. And now I've pulled that out. You can still hear it a little bit even when I didn't have any. So let's listen to EQ in and out. So we've added tons of brightness, we've added low end into it, and we've taken out some of that kind of mud, just like kind of buildup that we get in that 400 to 600 area. And now our overheads are feeling much more energetic, they're feeling much more lively, which is what we're trying to do here, is make them feel more like a more lively sound to our drum kit. So no EQ, EQ. So there is that action right there. Now there's one more thing I'd like on this. It's not super bad, but sometimes you can use I just want y'all to see this as a thing you can use. Sometimes you can use a de-esser if the hi-hats get too like nasally or just too much in the high end that they're pushing too much. And they actually even have a setting here that's overheads. They actually have more than one too, I believe. You come up here and you go to overheads, so they got one that's like auto high compression, limit and brighten, soften. So you can use, if you feel you need that, you can obviously adjust these see, like you can adjust the actual movement of what's happening on these if you don't want it to do as much. And it can just tame the cymbals a little bit more. You can hear, like, just listen to the hi-hats when you're listening to this. So I'm gonna turn it off first with that so you can hear then just listen to the hi-hats. Which right now, I don't feel like I need that. I'm gonna keep this bright and wait till I hear a little bit longer in the mix. I just want y'all to know, like, you could use a de-esser for more than just vocals. De-essers are good for handling like cymbals in this kind of area where you have a frequency that's too high and it sounds too hissy. They're also, you can use them on guitars too for like squeaks or pick noises too. You can help with that as well. So de-essers you can use them for more than just de-essing vocals as well. But this is basically, you know, how I would go about getting my overhead set. So here's just with processing without any where it started. So now we already got a pretty decent drum sound already just coming from the overheads where we started. So now we can, you know, move into all our direct mics and blend in with those, and we'll listen with the overheads at the same time so we can start hearing these guys come in together with each other. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and start with this kick in here. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna go ahead and choose my compressor, which here I'm going to use the 1176 Modern here. Ooh, wow, that was weird. That really lagged on me. So this compressor is a little bit more aggressive, which is fine for what I want for my kick in. My kick in, I want it to be aggressive and punchy. Like 1176s are good for punch. And this one's specifically made, this is a specific slate one. Like I don't even know any other places that have actually this version of 1176. The silver and the black one is what like every single person has, like every single plugin company has their version of it. Waves, Slate, UAD. I mean, there's even Pro Tools ones that are similar to it. But this modern one that they made is specifically like a Slate exclusive, that they just took their version of it and made it a little bit more grittier and made it where it is where it makes things a little bit tighter too, and so it works really good on aggressive drums. So I'm gonna use this on the kick drum. So let's just take a listen and get it dialed in. So let me turn those off for just a second. Let's just listen to what this is doing to the kick. So that's just making that much more aggressive, more pointed. I'm going to bring back in my overhead so we can hear what's going on with that. And then I'm going to really start moving along on really just dialing in the mix here and back and forth on what's going on here so we can get through everything. So I'm going to bring in SSL to do EQ. Bring in the low end of my kick, somewhere around between 50 and 80 is where we want to be. Then I want to do some attack between 2 and 4K, usually is where that's at. Then we can check up here around 8K where you can actually get it like around 5 to 8K. You can get some smack up there as well on what's on the top end of your kick drum. And we might find some like muddy areas in there. Like if you do need to cut, like usually around 300, there may be like 300 to 400. There's usually something inside the kick drum. So let's take a listen to that area. I'm going to unsolo these for 1 second while I listen to just the kick for this. Just more scooped field. Now another thing to do right here, now this is just if you decide you want to do this. Sometimes having bleed there's nothing wrong with that, but you can use the gate drums in here and you can decide to make this select like kick more often. I mean, you do have presets in here that you're more than welcome to go in there and start trying to, use something as a good starting place. I just want to make sure it's not changing my tone. But what the gate's doing here is it's only seeing when you're setting a level, which is what this line is right here on a gate. And once the signal crosses that level, the gate opens and it lets the sound through. Anything that's below that gate that's not loud enough, like any of the other stuff that's bleeding, it's just not going to let it pass and it's going to stay silent while it's doing that. Like you could hear how the snare came in right there. And it's not always bad to have bleed. I mean, if it sounds good in the kit, you don't have to worry about going in that crazy about doing gating unless you just really, something that you really feel you need to do to clean up, or like the bleed is making your processing not sound good. So now we're going to bring in the kick with that too, the kick out, which we already have that brought in. Now I'm going to do some EQ. Instead of the other one, I'm going to use the 401 and dial this one in. I want to try to level match this where it's not you see it's just bringing in more of the low end and bringing more of that in. Now I'm going to bring out the SSL and I'm going to attack this as well. We're going to bring in more of the low end. We're going to do it very similar to the kick in. But I want to add in that a little more beef to the kick down here. And I didn't use a gate on this one because the sub that's picking up the low end there is not really going to get any bleed at all. I mean, you can lightly hear it, but it's so small, it's something I'm not even really worried about in this scenario here. Then I just want to listen to for a little. Kind of hear that little around 800 on the kick out. So those two are working together nicely now. So this is where we started with these two guys. With just doing some of those settings. Now I'm going to bring in my trigger here just to bring it in with it. So now that we're listening to what's happening with the trigger. And usually with the triggers, I don't need to do much because they're already mastered, fully pulled together samples for the most part on those fronts. So it's usually just enhancing something in there if I want to add a little more, little presence and a little more punch. So now that I've gone through, that's kind of just where I'm handling my kicks. So just kind of as an overview, 50 to 80 is your low end on kicks, 300s to 400s the boxiness you kind of want to cut, 2K to 4K is around where the attack is, and 8K is like the click or some of just the super high end part that's going on there. Like now, we're going to, and then on this front too, like this is usually where I'll just do a slight, like I'll probably put I'll use a like light compression here just to pull these together, and the 401's great for that on the kick. So just blends all those mics together. I'm not hitting it very hard, but it's making them a little more punchier and making them blend in more with the song down here. So next thing I'm gonna go into is I'm gonna go into my snare here, and we're gonna take a look at those. So we've already dialed in our tape machine. Now we're just gonna take a look and listen into our, which that's already hitting pretty good on that area, so I'm not gonna drive this really much. We'll just do one, just give it a little bit of feel on there. Now I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna do my compression here, which I do like. I do like this, the 401 on snare tops. It sounds really good. Again, don't be afraid to come in here and use a starting one of these to, like one of these presets as a starting point and then match from there. So like snare punch is a good place to kind of start. Now I can look here and, you know, dial this in a little more how I want to. Cool. So on that front, I'm just getting that feeling a little bit good there. So now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pull out the FGA, which is an API style one, which works really good on things like snares because it's, I can't think of the word right now, but it's as you move as you move dBs and as you push up harder into it, the Q tightens a little. I think it's called proportional Q is what it's called. So it makes your cuts be a little, like your boosts and your cuts be a little bit stronger, and it can make them be a little bit punchier. So I'm going to try that on the snare here and go from there. So. And with snares, usually I'm going to turn off the other ones just so y'all can hear what's going on. But around 200s is where the body's happening. You can really hear that. Another big spot on snares is dealing with our with where our attack region is, which is usually between like 2.5 and 4K. And you can hold command and go in between these buttons on this one too. Which I like the way it sounded up better on the upper part of 3K here. Then up top for smack, like right around 7 to 8K is where you can get kind of more of the stick noise, where it'll be a little bit more intense on that. Like where the attack is, you can hear where it's. And kind of the same spots in that on snare. It's between like the 3 and 500 kind of area is where you can find snare stuff if you need to cut out like. And I'm not feeling like I need to cut anything out of this snare. It feels pretty good. There's not really like a bunch of mud there that's getting in the way or any of that. So now that I've dialed in my snare top, I'm going to go into the bottom, which is going to be a brighter sound. So I'm going to push that a little more into this, where you get a little more grit out of it. I'm going to grab a different compressor for this guy. I'm going to use the FG Stress, which is the distressor, which works really well for snare brightness, and it handles high end really well, and it's really good with transients too. So, we're going to start with snare punchy one down here, and then I'll. My attack is pretty open here, so like the more open you get, the more transients are coming through, so. Which I like to be a little faster on the attack on the snare, so it clamps down a little bit more on that, and we can bring that up some more. So it's just accenting that high end real nice. We're sitting between, we're getting a little bit of dB reduction here between like 3 and 6, staying kind of in this area. I'm not driving it super crazy on the snare right here. I'm going to bring in my EQ on the bottom, which I'll bring the SSL in for that. I'm not going to go super crazy on that, but I am gonna go in and add some more beef to this. One thing I needed to do over here on this other one that I'm used to doing is rolling off the low end of our snare, which I need to bring in if I bring in the CS EQ, I have a filter after that where I can control. It has a very good filter at the bottom here, so I can cut out anything that's like under 80, so I'm not having any of that low end getting in the way. And on your kicks, when any of the stuff we're doing here, you can cut out to about like 30, 35 in that area, just to control anything below the super sub area, because we did it on the actual sub here, but that's just gonna keep your low end nice and clean as you go across and go through this. So I'm going to bring this in. Let's listen with the other snare. I'm going to bring in some 200 to this as well. Then we're going to bring in some of that top end up here around 8 to 10K in that area. Probably might even I'm just going to listen right quick, see if there's any. So far we just have kick, snare, and overheads, and this thing's already starting to feel pretty full and pretty big. I'm gonna go over here and I'm gonna add another section here where with something that's fun that you can do with snares that can add a little more punch to it. You can use the bomber here, and it's pretty good to add like some you know, punch and stuff in there. So like I'm gonna click snare puncher here because we're gonna take a quick listen to these. I'm gonna bring the intensity down pretty good though. Just adding a little character to it, so that's what I was going through to go through there. So now we've set up our overheads, our toms, and our kick and snare, which is all feeling pretty big now. We're gonna bring in go to a section where we have, let's go ahead and let's take a look at our hi-hat while we're doing that, since we're looking at a section that has a bunch of hi-hat going on in it. So we got that going on. We got the APIs going on here. They're getting plenty of push right there. We can control the hi-hats with 401, perfect for this kind of stuff because it's going to be super, like very transparent and not color or change our hi-hat sound. And then I'm going to drop the CS EQ because it's nice and very transparent, so we can take off a lot of the hi-hat bottom end. You can basically go up to like 250 and be good on hi-hats, like 200 to 250. And we're just getting any mud that could possibly be there. Then we can add brightness up here up top on cymbals. If you need to add more, just kind of as a, if you need more attack, it's gonna be around that 1 to 6K range if you need it to be more present. And then just brightness in general is up high between 8 to 16K. And then also around like that 8K, you can like almost all that area between 1K and up. If you need to find a place to push some more stuff, you can do that with this. But I can really push up here and get some real brightness out of my snares, I mean my hi-hats. Like you can hear once it's in context right there how much more it makes the hi-hats get through. And I'm gonna do very similar settings here on the ride stuff because it's going to be handled very similarly where it's a cymbal, so I've copied that over to that area, so when we do add ride areas in there, it'll be able to pick that up. Okay. Lastly here, we're gonna go take a look at our toms and then our rooms, and then we'll talk about our drum bus and adding in some reverb here and a parallel send. So we're gonna go through those. Our toms, in general, we can go through those pretty quick. They are, your low end's handling between 70 and 200 in that area is where your low end stuff's gonna be on your toms. Let's go to a spot in the chorus over here where we got some toms happening. So let's just grab this 2 section right here and just kind of have this loop. So we want to get these toms feeling a little bit bigger, so let's take a look at our VTM here. So I want to push these pretty good. So now I got a little extra smack coming in from my VTM. Now let's make sure this is sitting good. Cool. Now what I'm going to use on this now is I'm going to throw in my compressor here, which 401's again great for doing this. 2 to 1, 3 to 1 is usually pretty good already for toms. Cool. So now that I got a little compression happening on these, let me drag this over here because this will make it easier to what's already going to be happening on the processing for this. Cool. So those are getting dialed in. Now again, I'm going to go in. This is my rack tom, so it's a little bit lower. Again, we're going to roll out some of the low end here. And you can use a gate in front of this if you want to have these toms be super clean, which we can go pick like tom debleed natural, and it should be pretty close to that, and we can do any adjustments we need to. So there we go. So like it's already cutting out all the other stuff. So you can use a gate to clear up any unnecessary bleed that you don't want. All right, let's go find some low end down here, probably around like 100 to 120 probably in this one since it's not quite as low. So that's already feeling good. There's usually some boxiness kind of in here around 400. I'm gonna tighten that up a little bit. Cool. Then we can get some real smack from the head on these on like 8K. Like 2K can bring out some brightness too, like presence if we want that. But then really up here around 8K is where the smack really is on some of these toms. You can really bring the stick attack up. You really hear the stick hit right there. And then one other thing you can do is if you want a little bit more on there, you can also add, we can add revival on there, which I'm going to do that on the bus because I'm just going to add it to both of them. So same thing on here. Let me pull this gate drum here on the floor tom. I'm going to do tom debleed natural. So I just had to move that just a little bit so it didn't catch the ride. So now all we're hearing is the tom come through. Roll off a little bit of my low end up to about 35. Now on this one, I'm gonna go down because this is my floor, so I know it's the low area. So I'm gonna get down to around 70, 80 and bump this up some. Cool, then get a little attack. Just build brightness in general. Then I can get our stick attack really right around 8K up here. Now they're really hitting a lot harder. Now we got both our toms. Let me pull, I'm gonna put a trimmer right after this just to control that volume just a tad on this one. So I just pulled that down a little bit. One more thing I'm going to do on the bus over here is, because this is something where I may automate later with the bus, but I'm going to throw on the revival, which is their exciter to hit both of those toms. Cool, so now I got a little sub hits going on there. So now we've got our drums really starting to feel pretty full with our hi-hats, our rides, with. Cool, so the last thing we're gonna do here now that we've talked about all these and gone through all that processing is going to be looking at our rooms here. So let's take a look at these rooms right quick, and then we'll talk about these last few things. Drove that side a little bit harder. Let me move that. So now I'm going to go into processing my rooms. I'm going to add the VCC on here like I normally would, put it back on the API channel. Then I'm going to use the FG stress because, again, rooms are very bright, so the distressor handles high end very well. So I'm going to go ahead and just dial these in. We're going to crush this pretty good because it's a room. So we're going to get 6 to 1 is a good starting place. We'll probably go up higher to like 10 to 1 or something, but we'll start at 6 to 1. You can hear how much it clamps down on it depending on your attack. And I actually liked it better at 6 to 1 where I was sitting at pushing it a little more, just really bringing up a lot more of that. Just bringing up a lot more of that room sound. So now, when we bring this in with the kit, just bringing so much more liveliness behind the back end of this. So now that I've done this and I've gone through each of our setups here, and now the last thing I need to do, I've gotten that dialed in with the compressor. I'm going to throw some EQ on there, and I'm going to use the CS lift there because I don't really want to change what's going on there. You do have some rooms and some high end and some beef in your rooms, so. So now we've got a nice big punchy drum sound. Last things we're going to look at here is just some of the parallel processing stuff, and we'll go through that pretty quickly. We're going to talk, like just right here, this is all our drums going into one channel here, and we can either use FG gray or FG red. I'm a big fan of FG gray. We're going to use 2 to 1 processing here. We have the attack slow at like 30 or 10 milliseconds. And that's just gluing this together just a little bit, our whole kit, because it's all coming into this, and we're just tapping it just a little bit, not where we're doing too much stuff going on there. Okay, so Next thing we want to do is, we're kind of listening to this now in the song where this is going. And it's there, but it's still not pushing through as much as we would like it to push through. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring in some parallel compression. And I have these made up on all my shells. It's the only ones I'm going to send to the parallel compression here. And I'm going to open up my bus. Like normally we would just make a new one, but I've already had these on here, so I'm just going to open them and get them back in here. And then I'm going to change the compressor I'm using on that. So we have all these going in. I'm going to grab all these ones right here, and I want them to be balanced into this same thing. Like I want them to be the way that I have them sitting in the mix here. I want them to go into my parallel compression the same. So I'm going to use Option Command H, which is copy to send, and I'm going to do volumes and pans, and it's going to be both on send to A for this. So I'm going to click OK. So now all my drum compression that's going into that is moving exactly where I have my tom movements here that they're going into this. So let's just take a quick listen to on here, and we're going to crush this a little bit on this drum compression. And I'm going to use the 1176, the regular one, because it's pretty good for pumpy stuff like this. Oh, I just needed to mute these things here, and it'll still be the same. Okay. Super slow attack, fast release. And what we hear this really doing is this making our attack and our point really strong. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to blend this in with the kit. I obviously have some automation on this bus, and that is why I had it hidden. And that's because I had a little intro part here that was going on with this. I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of that so I can just blend it in where I want to, so we can hear this. Makes it feel much. So it makes our drum kit much bigger and punchier. Also adds it's adding smack to all our shells. And you'll hear it on stuff like toms too, like in this tom fill up here. And then over here now we'll just bring in our drum verb, which for the most part on these I like to use them on shells for the most part for what they're going into. So we're gonna just go ahead and turn this on our drums on here, and we're gonna set them where it's not like a too crazy amount of level, but usually toms and snares are ones I'm always sending to drum reverb because they're the ones that it's not going to sound muddy whenever we're adding that kind of information in there. And then with these, when I'm mixing, we can use follow main pan, and then they'll just do exactly whatever we're doing down here as a mix. And that's typically something I usually do across the board for these type of things. I'm going to need to move my hi-hat back to the left, but you see as I move this, it moves the send with it. Drums, the rooms are already pretty verbed out. So now that that's going into our drum verb here, we will bring that in. We're going to pick a nice little medium room going on here. just to go with something that's not a huge realistic full drum room. Sounds pretty good, so let's do that. So that's going through that whole thing. Let's just take a listen just to what this sounded like before we did anything to it, just so we can hear the final transition of what this whole kit sounds like. So this is where we started. And then here's where we ended up. So we went from a raw drum sound, so we went through that process there of going from a raw drum sound all the way through to having a full mixed, punchy, full hitting kit that can stand up and set up in the mix at that point. So you've kind of seen the processes I've gone through here. Hopefully this helps you with your drum processing as you guys go forward and you're doing your mixes, and you can get your drums a little bigger, fatter, punchier, and more controlled. So thanks everybody for watching, and we will catch you all next time. Y'all have a great rest of your week and weekend. Later.
Thanks everybody for watching. If you found this content useful, please like this video. It will tell YouTube to show it to others. If you are enrolled, please go to the Seminars tab on the my.trcoa website and take the quiz over tonight's lesson. And if you need to book one-on-one time with an instructor, text 512-231-0344. If you aren't enrolled, go to trcoa.edu to find out more information about what we do. Also, please post in the chat subjects you'd like to see for our upcoming live streams. And as always, subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you guys on the flip side. Bye, everybody.